Hello and welcome. I'm the Restless Kaiser.
And I'm Woolly Mike, but together we are
Modelling for Advantage. So the war in the Mediterranean rages, or it will. Well, we're going to do a Mediterranean combined arms bolt action campaign.
Rule Britannia.
Rule Britannia, sir. Rule Britannia. Heart of oak. I do love a tall sailor and a handsome ship, sir. No sailors in here, though. It's too small a scale.
Okay.
Shall I say what's in the box? Because I'm going to be playing the Royal Navy. This box, which is the... should have said that, shouldn't we? It's the Royal Navy Fleet. It's the starter set, basically, for Victory at Sea. 8 resin models. HMS Eagle. HMS... They're all HMS. So we got the Eagle, the Duke of York, the Neptune, the Belfast, and the Dido, as well as 3 Tribal class destroyers and 3 string bags, also known as Fairy Swordfish biplane torpedo bombers, the heroes of Toronto. You probably didn't hear any of that over the crackling of the bag that Woolly is opening.
Very, very strangely rolled bag. Not right.
It's like like you get birthday card wrapping,
yes.
Isn't it? Right, so he's showing you the bits of paper. Your design instructions. Tells you need that because there's a baggies with little metal bits in, which we'll come to. That piece of paper tells you not to eat Warlord's resin. Don't do that. It's really toxic. Unit cards and baggies. I think we should start with the capital ships. We've looked at the Italian fleet already, and it seems that you're going to get an aircraft carrier or a battleship, 3 cruisers, and 3 destroyers in each of these bags, but the choice of ships in them is definitely not equal. So although the Italians get 1 aircraft carrier and the British get 1 aircraft carrier, the Italians get an aircraft carrier which looks fairly modern and reasonably large in design, whereas HMS Eagle is possibly the first enclosed hangar aircraft carrier. It's certainly a very, very early one. She's built, I believe, on the hull of a World War I era dreadnought, or even pre-dreadnought, and so she's quite small. She's got there's kind of open hangars. I don't know whether that's quite the term, but the hangar space below you can see into it as well as some of the boat decks. But yeah, she's quite small. Fidelity-wise, though, this is a lovely model. Interestingly, to get some of these deck markings, they've made them in relief. Same with the elevators, and it just makes them stand out when you do a bit of dry brushing. Because with a ship like this, you're going to paint the side grey, the top brown, and then you're kind of done.
Yeah. So the card describes her as a fleet carrier, and it was originally built as a seaplane carrier, based on an ex-Chilean battleship, the Almirante Cochrane.
Right, so this was a ship that was being built for Chile, and then when the First World War broke out. Yes. So compared to, does it say on here? Yeah, that Italian aircraft was described as having 12 flights of aircraft, whereas this one's got 5. So these ships, these early carriers, there's about 3 of them. They're very small. They were used a lot in the Mediterranean and convoy escorts. If you heard about sort of carriers as being the dominant weapon of World War II, and we talked a bit about this in the Italian video, the British went for an umbrella doctrine. The idea was there would be a fleet carrier with every fleet, and its principal job was to provide close air defence. Yeah, so the Royal Navy has a kind of a doctrine of smaller armoured carriers with a lower aircraft component because they're there to provide close-in fleet defence. When you've got to sail through the Mediterranean next to everybody else's land-based aircraft, that's probably what you need. So this will be quite interesting to see. We're not totally familiar with the game, so presumably the fact that it says 5 flights of aircraft, the player has some agency over what he onboards them with. Because obviously fighters having no strike component, I don't know whether you would bother putting fighters. As a player, where you can buy your air suite, would you ever buy fighter aircraft? I don't know. We'll have to see how that goes. She's also, strangely for a carrier, has got a battery of 9 6-inch guns, which seem quite big for an aircraft carrier. But anyway, there we go. That's HMS Eagle.
The Grand Old Duke of York.
Well, so if this is a warship based on a hull from the First World War, this is the newest battleship in the world. The American ones. The Americans do build some warships during the war. But KG-5s, the King George V class of warships, are a really strange ship. They are designed under the restrictions of the Washington and London naval treaties. They're started before the war, but many of them are completed during the war, which means their completion times get really dragged. When the war starts, a lot of stuff stops and focus moves on to refitting stuff that can be used now. Things like this are in longer term developments. Like, that's not going to be finished for another 18 months. Let's stop working on that and move them crews over on something more immediate. But she does get finished. It says on here we've got a 1943 pattern, but I think she's finished before then. I might be wrong, certainly the class is. But it was designed with these restrictions. The key restriction from the Washington Naval Treaty on battleships to stop escalation is it caps the size at 35,000 tons. When you design a battleship, you make choices about speed, endurance, armor, and firepower. It's usually called the triangle: speed, armor, firepower. But as soon as you start talking about Pacific, endurance becomes a significant factor as well. The more space you need for bunkers, fuel bunkers, provisioning. So, for example, German World War I dreadnoughts don't have accommodation for the crew on board because they're going to fight in the North Sea. They're going to sleep in barracks ashore. That doesn't mean that there's literally nowhere for them to sleep, but there's not enough to live, They're going to really travel for a few days before the guys start getting really cranky. So those kind of things. And King George V ends up, therefore, having 14-inch guns. And it has 10 of them.
12.
Is it 12? Is it not 424, Mike?
Yes, 424. That's my maths going wrong.
She has a quad 14-inch gun forward and a quad 14-inch back, and then she's got this second turret forward, which is a twin super firing 4-inch gun. I have no idea why that is. Presumably it can't also be a quad because of the weight and the magazine handling and so forth. But why 333 isn't a better arrangement? Why this is a twin? It's incredibly rare for a battleship to have mixed numbers of guns in a turret. Because normally what's happened is you've designed a turret, a 3-gun turret, and you're happy with it, and so you use that turret.
Yes.
You don't go and design another one, but obviously she's operating within some very serious limitations. She has a lot of armour, but also 14-inch guns. The rest of the fleet is using 15-inch guns. Newer ships, Rodney and Nelson, have got 16-inch guns. So this is another calibre of gun. But I think it was about cheap. I wanted the maximum number of battleships for the lowest amount of cash. And so a number of compromises have been made with this ship. Nonetheless, these are the most modern ships in the Royal Navy. So if we compare that with the Italian Navy that we looked at, they had a brand new, quite a big aircraft carrier. It may not have actually been used in reality, but they were building it. And an ancient battleship. And in this one, you've got one of the oldest aircraft carriers in the world and one of the most modern battleships. So it's nice that the fleets, they're not trying to make them symmetrical in that respect. There's definitely going to be differences. She ends up with a flank speed of 5 inches. And look, with Old Eagle, it's only 4 on the carrier. But they're lovely, lovely models. Metal parts like you've seen before. This is some superstructure and some cranes. Presumably this crane is for recovering float planes. Yeah. And a little bit of superstructure there. And then, 424. It's very odd. It's very odd. People like Drukinifel will be able to tell you exactly why it is, but it still doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I think that treaty restrictions are a big part of it. She gets a 39-inch range with her rifles as well. But also she's a very substantial, she's got the 5.25, which is a dual purpose, 16-inch guns in the secondary battery, but they're which are dual purpose. She's got a very, very substantial secondary armament, which again is necessary at the risk of you're so close to shore in the Mediterranean, which is mostly where these guys served until later in the war when they went to face the Japanese.
So, Dido-class anti-aircraft cruiser.
Dido-class anti-aircraft cruiser. This is the first one we've handled with any flash on it. And this is like film thickness, isn't it?
It's almost like there was a seam, isn't it? A very, very fine.
It's tiny. So again, the cast, apart from these tiny bits of film, I'll need to get a very sharp knife to remove. Won't need to damage the model in any way. The casting is otherwise very clean. HMS Dido anti-aircraft cruiser. So she's got this dual-purpose 5.25 inch like the Prince of Wales and the Duke of York and that generation of ship, the KG5s, that's it.
Yeah.
The Royal Family. And so she comes out with, is it 8 twin turrets? 4 twin turrets on the metal parts? Or is it 5? 5 here. She's got 5 mounting points, and we've got 5 pairs of guns here. On the card it says 8 5.5 inch and 1 4 inch. Is one of these very slightly smaller?
I think they're all the same. It's very difficult to...
So Dido is one of a very small number of light cruisers built, finished during the war, and she's been built as an anti-aircraft cruiser, which is why she's got the 5.25 on that. So if you think compared to some of those Italian cruisers, it's a bit smaller, a bit lighter. There's an American light cruiser which I think has 14 5-inch guns in twin turrets. It is just, it is a monster. It's what we... during the course of the wars, people started to collect data upon what they were doing, as there's a combination of rate of fire and weight of shots when you look at effectiveness of anti-aircraft, and it was basically the calculation was how many tons of munitions do you need to put up to bring down a plane, and so on the whole, the bigger the gun, the less tons you had to put in the air, but the smaller the gun, the higher the rate of fire. And so what you tend to find with World War II anti-aircraft is somewhere between 4 and 5 inches, a bit of a sweet spot. So between 4, the guns much over 5 inch, often they don't track so fast. The rate of fire is relatively low. And then, of course, you have to remember the majesty of the Allied invention. The proximity fuse will suddenly make the bigger shells much, much more effective. Proximity fusing is something that the Axis powers never get because it's pretty sophisticated. I mean, think about that industrially. The Germans, Italians, and Japanese can't put radars in all of their aircraft, let alone all of their ships. They certainly aren't going to invent a tiny radar that you can put in every shell that you fire, right? Which is what it is. It's a tiny proximity. It's a tiny radar set. It's pretty crude, but a proximity fuse detects an object and then fuses the gun. So these things become very, very powerful in the later war. These kind of bigger anti-aircraft guns. And so you'll find light cruisers as anti-aircraft ships in significant fleets, rather than fighting other cruisers. They're often backing up a heavier ship.
So, Leander-class light cruisers, HMS Neptune.
So the Leander-class, these are 6-inch light cruisers, are they? Is that right? 6-inch guns. Yeah, 4. So we've got mounting points for 8, so 4 pairs. So 1 starboard super firing, forward and super firing. And this is a pretty standard universal light cruiser. Generally speaking, the British ones will have slightly less. So you remember what I said about the 10,000 tons limit on cruisers for the Washington Naval Treaty? On the whole, people built heavy cruisers as big as they could. The Royal Navy built a lot of its light cruisers slightly smaller because its thinking was kind of about its global responsibilities. It's like, one-on-one isn't a reliable game. So how about we expect to have 2? in a situation. If by making our fleet of light cruisers slightly smaller, having 8 guns instead of 10 or 12, for example, this is one of the little ones. This one is quite big, but there's some bit smaller than this as well. But generally, they'll be a little bit smaller than the others. So 3 triples is a pretty common arrangement, as opposed to 4 twin, for example. So British light cruisers will often be outgunned by other people's light cruisers, but that's because they're expecting to have more of them, or having one rather than none. In a situation, you know, they need a lot of cruisers. We know about the problem with the shortage of fleet destroyers because we get those 50 Lend-Lease ones from the Americans. However, for a destroyer can't really escort a convoy going to Mumbai. It hasn't got the endurance. You need cruisers for that. You need, you know, big endurance ships, and they're like the universal ship, the light cruiser. Scouting is their principal role, but anti-aircraft, showing the flag, because these have a crew of about 1,000 guys on them. This is a big old ship. Anyway, that's the Leander.
The Edinburgh class.
So Edinburgh is a town class heavy
HMS
cruiser.
Belfast.
HMS Belfast. HMS Belfast, Kazanikoff. Possibly the most famous ship in England. Why is that, Mike?
She's still there.
Because she's still there. She's moored on the Thames. Some people walk past her every day on their way to work. I've taken groups of kids from school around her a few times. She's been modified because she was still in service post-war. 13,000 tons. I'm guessing that's a combination of things. One is that she's one of the many ships with several late war upgrades. She'll be called a light cruiser because despite her armour, which is not insignificant for a cruiser, she's got a 6-inch gun main armament, not an 8-inch gun main armament. But you can see, like you said, she's broader, she's longer, she's just a big old ship. You can go and visit her on the Thames. She had radar, and she was involved in sinking the Scharnhorst, like this one.
Yeah.
So if you if you are privileged enough to be an Englishman born and true and live here, and you visit HMS Belfast, in the plotting room, down in the bowels of the ship, they've got it set up from the Scharnhorst chase, and there's like audio recordings of different kind of sightings and so forth. And so if you sit there for a couple of hours, you hear what they heard in the chase to sink the Scharnhorst.
The other bit that's got me is all of this is like thin metal and very fragile. There's the.
This is for the Belfast.
Yeah.
It's just that the plugs are substantial, isn't it? So the recesses upon which you sink the guns, they've almost got like their own casements or whatever. They're quite substantial. But it's nice that they got, rather than just leaving these superstructure pieces off that won't mould well in the format, they give you them in a different material. Yeah, I'm still enjoying. I like how smooth it is on the bottom. I can't know it.
It's a very strange but nice tactile sensation. That's all I can say.
It is nice to just touch this surface. Which normally with resin you don't get because they've been filed. I've seen them at Warlord making this stuff. Is like poured from like the kind of jug you might make gravy in, into the molds, and all the ones we've seen sit flat. So yeah, I like the fact that you can do the Hunt the Scharnhorst game with these. That's interesting to see. As a cruiser, the Edinburgh class light cruiser, so she's got 12 6-inch guns. Compare that with what we were looking at before. The Leander had 8. 12 versus 8. And if you see, you can go down into one of the shell rooms on that, and it's like, have you ever seen the autoloader in a cutaway in a T-72? It's like that, but in the room the size of a school gymnasium. It's just this big circle with all of these different shells on. You're thinking, what different ones? Armour piercing HE? It's like, there's about 4 different types of star shell. There's just loads of different types of shells in there. And to think, you don't get to see it in action, but if you think a gun like that spits out several rounds a minute, that disc must spin round at a fair old lick. But But still, a guy has to shovel it into a cage that raises it up.
And then you had the shell, and then depending on the caliber of gun and size, several bags of powder. So rather than having a casing like a tank shell or a bullet.
Certainly with the battleship-sized rifles, probably the 8-inch guns are like that. I'm not sure that you could put extra charge with these. One of the things that says that you can tell with that, it may be that the charge is loaded separately, I can't remember, is if a gun is ever described as QF, quick firing, that meant it was all in one.
Yeah, single.
The language goes out of use when pretty much everything is quick firing, but you still see it crop up in circumstances where it's not normal for a gun of that caliber to be quick firing.
Yes.
Yeah, is when you'll still see it. And I don't know where those numbers are with these caliber of guns. So those are our 3 cruisers. I think that they are interesting because I think the Italian cruisers are stronger. Belfast is an interesting case because the armor piercing is lower, but the volume is higher. So it might be better or worse than the Italian one. But the other 2 light cruisers are quite small light cruisers, which is interesting. So the Tribal class destroyer then, this is, we did a quick count, there's only 16 of them ever made. This was the premium fighting ship of the Royal Navy at the early days of the war. They're very powerful for a destroyer. They've got, most destroyers have got 4 or 5 guns, you know, a couple at the front, 1 at the back and 1 on each side, something like that is pretty common, sometimes 2 on each side. But this, because they've got centerline twin mounts in turrets, for the period, this is novel. This is very strong. They've got 8 4.7-inch guns rather than 5 or 6 guns. So generally a destroyer can only bear with 3 or 4 guns. And they're in single mounts without a lot of local control, etc. They're very fast, which in this game only comes out at 7 inches. They're quite big for a destroyer and they're very modern. And the Navy put some of its best captains in them. Probably you wouldn't recognise the names of the captains because they were captains, not admirals. But your admirals of this war were your good captains in the last one. So these, and I say their best captains, they put their best commanders in here who would probably, a destroyer has probably got a commander as a captain in wartime rather than an actual captain. Handling the model, compared to the others, this is a different resin formula. This like on the back, it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't seem, if I'm going to be brutally honest, it doesn't seem quite as crisp.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't seem as nice. Whether this is a different formula because the different sizes of ships, you know, the curing rate, something technical that requires it. But this material feels more like the Warlord resin, the bendy resin, whereas this is the traditional resin with this extremely smooth underneath. I mean, we're not in the factory, we can't see, but I suspect this would have come out a lot better if it had been made out of this stuff. Yeah. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying that this is definitely crisper though. This lighter grey resin. What do you reckon, Mike?
I think so too. You know, you're looking at the guns. I can see you needing to get a sharp knife out on some. You know, you've got a little sticky up bit that's not part of the ship. Just a stray bit of resin. You can just see it on the front of the guns there.
Oh yeah, you've got an errant piece of resin there you're going to cut away. So because these guns are much smaller, this has probably reached a point below which casting them in metal wouldn't be a good idea either. Because they're too flimsy. So I know, like with the originals, like Skytrex ones of these, the guns were all cast in the metal. They weren't separate in any way. And I think that was the only way they could make those small rods not just disappear. It's by having them cast into the hull. So they've had to do that with these ones. So there's obviously a bit of a loss of fidelity. But yeah, tribals. So it's an interesting choice of ship. I don't know how many of these spent much time in the Mediterranean, which is our bit, and there weren't many of them. But they were usually where the action was with these ships. Really important. In the early part of the Norway campaign, like I said, around Narvik. these were responsible for trashing quite a lot of German shipping in that campaign, and the Germans didn't have a lot of maritime, certainly military shipping to lose, because ounce for ounce, these outclassed those German destroyers significantly.
Obviously, though, the thing I'm just looking at is tribal class, because obviously it looks like people that the British fought over time. So we've got the Zulus, the Ashanti, the Gur.
Oh yeah,
you know.
Yeah, Bedouin, Punjabi, Sikh, Somali, Tartar, Zulu, etc. I'm not sure we would use the term tribal to describe any of those groups of people these days. We're a bit more sensitive than that, but certainly very powerful destroyers. I'm a bit of a fanboy of them. Yeah. And that was the last of the ships. We get 3 of these. I think as a fleet, to make this into a fleet, the first thing you need to do is to buy another pack of destroyers, because I don't think you find a battleship tooling around with only 3 destroyers as an escort. And, well, not before a battle anyway. So the last thing is the mate of the fairy swordfish, is that right?
Yeah. The old string bag.
The old string bag. So, the flight stand, Mike?
Comes with, like, I've just realised now, it looks like a toilet seat.
It looks a lot like a toilet seat, yeah. Absolutely.
And on the base, we've got 3 letters on here. So you drop the ring over the top, and you can be a B for a bomber, T for a torpedo, or A for attack.
Do you think A for attack? I don't know what A is. It's not fighter.
Well, no, that's what I mean. I'd say normally...
on the Italian ones we had fighter or bomber.
Yes.
F and B. Whereas this has got BTA. B bomber, T torpedo, makes sense.
I think so. Like a lot of the more modern planes, and I think the American Navy did that. You know, they were attack aircraft. The bombers, fighters. You know, like the American Hornet. It's an FA-18. You know, so it's an attack aircraft. So it's probably some fighter capability, but would then not be a full bomber, a fully loaded bomber.
It says fairy swordfish. Yeah. I don't know how you can make that into a fighter.
Yeah, so that's why it's an attack aircraft, so it can attack, but not necessarily a strong attack.
Yeah, some other mission.
Yeah,
like a aerial reconnaissance. I don't know. Anyway, but you overlay the toilet seat onto the base to show the loadout of the particular aircraft, and then the aircraft themselves, they're mounted in this kind of L shape
echelon,
showing the planes in echelon rather than in a diamond pattern, which I guess is a more authentic World War II formation. It's just I don't know. I don't find it as tidy as a diamond, but it definitely looks like a biplane.
It does. It
does look
very nice definition from above.
Yeah, I mean, obviously from the front, they cannot leave the space between the wings of the biplane on this. It's like 1/1800th, I think.
Yes.
They couldn't leave a cavity there. And if they could, there'd be a massive strut, which would probably look even worse. But it certainly captures the essence of the fairy swordfish. These are your strike aircraft. So again, like in the other set, we had strike aircraft. We didn't have fighters. I don't know whether fighters are maybe just markers. You know, like you have an air defense rating or something, because I don't know the game very well. We'll have to see. Whereas the strike aircraft are actually deployed at certain positions, like which will affect the range of anti-aircraft weapons and so forth. You know, where do you come down and attack from? They plug in. We don't have any glue with us. We should have thought about this, shouldn't we? So we can show. But given the fact that it's actually got swordfish written on the stand, I assume you're never going to need a collection of flight stands. But for transport purposes, you might want to magnetise them. But you shouldn't need to magnetise them, because also these 3 letters on the flight stand are very different from the Italian ones we looked at, so they're obviously specific to it. Well, yeah, it's an interesting little curiosity, the flight stand. It's certainly something unique. And we get 4 stands of them. Now, again, I don't know how the game works. But these ships should probably struggle by being attacked by 16 aircraft in 1940, because the amount of anti-aircraft weapons you have in that early part of the war, it's one of the things they realise. Every time a ship goes into refit, they strip out half the secondary armament, sometimes one of the major turrets, and fill it full of anti-aircraft guns if it's a major warship. And these guys were the heroes of Toronto.
Yeah.
Was it about a dozen of them sunk?
I'm not sure how many, but they came in and the Italians weren't very happy with the success.
Yeah, it disabled half the Italian heavy ships for 6 to 12 months.
And of course, damaging the rudder on the Bismarck and the fuel tank.
Indeed. You know, it's just, so maybe a string bag biplane that you could probably outrun if you were going downhill and had a good breakfast. Still had a role to play.
I know I've got some friends in the Navy, and one of them was saying with the Fleet Air Arm, on certain days, the Swordfish would come over the carrier deck, and it would just actually match the speed and just slowly come down because they're so slow.
Right.
Rather than come flying.
Stall speed was less than 20 knots.
And then almost like a Harrier does now.
Yeah.
You just come in, get over the desk, match speed, and then just slowly nose down and pop.
Slowly nose down. Yeah. There you go. It might be, but 20 knots feels pretty slow to me for an aeroplane, but you never know. All right, guys, I hope that was interesting for you. A little bit of history along with a look at the models. Thank you for watching.
Cheers.
Bye. If you're still here and you're looking for ways to support the channel, there's obviously a lot of ways down in the description, but a key way is to use our affiliate links to Warlord Games and others. You buy your models from them, it doesn't cost you a penny more, and we earn a little bit of commission. Thank you.